And why didn't you want to be the guy who kicks the penalty that wins the World Cup? You were like, I want to be the guy holding a clipboard going, I'm glad I signed him. What happened? Look, what did you see? What movie did you see that made you want to do this?
You know, so I think everyone wants to play. Everyone wants to, be the pitcher or catcher for the Yankees or point guard for the Knicks if you're growing up in New York. And I think every young kid who plays sports wants to be a professional athlete. And, my father coached junior high school basketball at IS1A3, Paul Robeson. I grew up around a lot of different sports. I feel like every morning waking up, I come down the steps and, my father would have the Daily News, the New York Post, the Times, the Journal News, and we were always just thumbing through the box scores, looking through to see, not just who scored, but also how they scored, not just who won, but how they won. And I think just even going through playing, I think if you ask my coaches, I was probably that guy who was really annoying on your team from the standpoint who's always asking questions like, but why? But why? So for me, I think I always wanted to play at the highest level I could. I grew up, in the shadows of Giant Stadium during the NASL with the Cosmos heyday in the 70s. But, growing up through high school and college, professional soccer wasn't really an opportunity here in the United States. But, I always thought whether it was coaching, whether it was going into management, I was always just so fascinated with not only competing, but understanding like how teams win, understanding what players kind of make teams a success. And I think I was always just super motivated with that.
Okay. Yeah. And when it comes to, we've spoken to a couple journalists about just the ins and outs of how a MLS team is constructed. And this is probably a massive question that can't really be answered. We don't have enough time to answer it, but
I feel like Mike Jacobs will answer it if you ask it though.
But I'm curious about just in the last even few years, the changes that MLS has implemented in how to build the roster, whether it's GAM, TAM, and all this other stuff.
Thank you, ma'am.
As a fan, it can be confusing because we don't know what's the real money, what's the fake money, what is it Bitcoin that's being transferred between clubs. As a GM, do you have to is there a manual that you study to make sure that you get everything right, and then you can speak to other GMs in your coded language that only you two understand, or is it simpler than we all think?
Well, it's one of the only leagues in the world for soccer that has a salary cap.
Right.
So when you think about other leagues in our country, you think about NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, where it's super common in sports in our country. For our sport, it's very unique. And, there is a competitions guideline. When I first got into working in Major League Soccer, I was the assistant technical director. So I was like Peter Vermees' assistant in Kansas City. I would go to his house like every couple days. We would with the competitions guideline, and he would ask me kind of just to memorize, like cover to cover, the things that were in there. And he also would say jokingly, though, make sure you understand it really well, because in 6 months' time, they're going to change half of it.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think the fact that it has a salary cap and the fact that the mechanisms are so unique, it's probably as challenging a league in the world as there is to build a team.
Okay. Now, have you ever seen Peter Vermees smile?
I tell you, he is one of the funniest guys and most fun guys to be around.
I refuse to believe that.
He is just very serious about his craft, very serious about his job. There's not a more competitive dude that you'll see when he was playing and now coaching. You obviously can tell on the sideline when you see him, but he's dialed in and he's a pretty serious dude on the field. He has a lot of fun away from soccer.
Oh, man, we got to hang out with Peter Vermees.
What did you think? I'm curious, because I was thinking about Peter Vermees, the legendary meme. He became that meme of him saying
the camera caught him.
The camera caught him being like, F off. You remember that?
Not only do I remember that, I actually send it to him once a month.
You're like, if there was a camera in the conference room, I would be a meme.
I know what game that was. I know what action it was. Right. Yeah, for sure. So,
what's such a great moment. And you because we can't hear him and we just see him.
It's better.
It's so much better.
So much better.
It's just there's it's like a silent film. It's beautiful.
To go on the question Christian asked, the idea of you had the unenviable task of creating a team from scratch. What do you do first? Do you start thinking about, all right, who's the player that's going to be a pillar in our community that bonds the community with the team? Do you start thinking about designated players first? Do you start thinking about TAM players first? What's the first chip that falls?
It's interesting because there's so many different ways you can do it. And you look around our league, we've had so many different expansion teams that have been built, obviously in a variety of different ways. And,
did you study FC Cincinnati and go, let's not do that?
Look, you know what I mean? For us, I tried to not look at the teams that had a lot of success. teams that had won early, teams that pursued championships, but also try to look at teams maybe that didn't do so well. And the reality is, not just in our sport, in like all sports in our country that have expansion teams, they usually do really poorly initially.
Yeah.
Like really bad.
Yeah.
The teams usually don't score a lot. They tend to concede a lot. Again, it's hard to put a roster together, so usually it takes you a couple years to kind of figure out what you're doing.
Right.
So, for us, I think it was important to make sure that we identified, for our ownership, looking at that first, what things were important to them. The idea of building not only a competitive team, but one that's be sustainable. One that would not just be like a one-hit wonder, but one that can have continued success is really important. And, knowing that, we try to think, looking at maybe the best practices among teams that were existing teams, maybe some other expansion teams, not just in our sport, maybe in other sports. I think, most leaders in our sport all over the world, they say, well, I want to play like Barcelona, or I want to play like Bayern Munich. Where I could appreciate that from a sporting standpoint, we also spend a lot of time looking at like other teams and other leagues with salary caps. So to me, I try to think sustained success. What does the Patriots do so well? What is it the Tampa Bay Rays do that they can compete with the Yanks and Red Sox with a much smaller budget? How do teams like Sporting Kansas City, Portland Timbers, the Seattle Sounders, year after year, how are they competitive? And for us, we try to create our own best practices from there. And, we had a good idea about what things we thought would be important to kind of like the ethos or the core tenets to build a team around.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, especially you guys got off to a good start because even as an expansion team, we were pretty solid.
Defensively, very strong.
Yeah, we're NYCFC fans, and I remember the first time NYCFC played Nashville, and I'm like, this is an expansion. Why are they defending so well? I mean, there is a confidence, and maybe that you can talk about that a little bit. Maybe it comes from like a Walker Zimmerman, who is now a designated player, but the confidence when it comes from Nashville, at least defensively, it seems like that was a real tenet to building the team.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, the fact that expansion teams tend to concede so many goals. You look at the recent expansion teams and you see the goals conceded per season. Most of the worst teams defensively in league history were first-year teams. Right. That all got better over time. But, for us, I think having a manager that we thought would be sophisticated tactically, would understand how to be able to impede other teams from scoring while also create chances themselves. The idea of, we looked at several managers in our league, abroad, lower leagues, college. We try to really look at a full base, try to get an idea of what we thought we needed. And, the longer we started looking into the idea of what we thought was important for our club, initially I kind of thought it had to be someone who's American, who understood the American player in the American league. As we went along farther and farther, we thought it was less somebody who had to be like born in the United States, but more just simply someone who understood our league and player. And the fact that we had Gary Smith already in the door with the USL team in Nashville, the fact that he did one MLS Cup in 2010, quickly became kind of a no-brainer that he was the obvious choice.